And so, my friends, I want to start with what I thought was the biggest takeaway from SmackDown a week ago. Now, in fairness, we do this show every Thursday, and so previewing SmackDown isn't something I'm really interested in doing. And sometimes it's a little bit hard to say, all right, let's go back 6 days, but we're going to for our purposes today because, we got something that yours truly is very interested in. We finally got a moment where Jacob Fatu got to get on the mic. Not one of the backstage segments where he's walking to the ring, where he's walking in the background with the I love you solo, which we love. We love those. They're great segments. But this is the first time we got to really listen to Jacob Fatu as he drilled down on what is to come. Now, segment starts off with Solo Sikoa in the ring. We haven't seen Solo. We haven't heard from Solo since losing Tribal Combat on the debut of Raw on Netflix. Because, again, I don't know if you know this or not, but Raw is now on Netflix. Eventually, that's going to get old. But for right now, we're just going to keep noting it every time. As long as they keep noting that it's Raw on Netflix, we'll call it Raw on Netflix because branding is apparently very important. So, okay. Now, Solo Sikoa goes out. He utters nary a word. There is nothing to come out of Solo Sikoa's mouth that makes you think he's about to acknowledge Roman Reigns, which is what he said he would do if he lost Tribal Combat. He doesn't really acknowledge either Tama Tonga or Jacob Fatu. There's nothing that really happens. He just leaves the ring. Now, he looks studly. He looks like Studley Dudley, right? He goes out there in the red jacket, and you say to yourself, this is going to be the moment. Is he going to renege on what he said, on his promise, on his guarantee to acknowledging Roman Reigns? Will it happen? And the answer, of course, is no, or at least not yet. He neither reneges on what he said, nor does he acknowledge Roman outright. He just leaves, which leads to Jacob Fatu, who I will argue from now until I'm blue in the face, is the most interesting non-main event guy they have right now. That is not to say that I think that Jacob Fatu is not a main event guy. I very much believe if you put Jacob Fatu across the ring from Gunther, I think you'd have a hell of a match and you'd have a hell of a program. And that guy would probably do better on the mic than what Jey Uso's not doing it for me. The Jey Uso Gunther thing, we're going to get to that later. But Jacob Fatu, you put him up against Gunther, he looks like a legit champ. He looks like a legitimate threat. You put him across the ring from Cody Rhodes, looks like a legit champ. You could put him up against just about anybody. Oh, and by the way, they've kind of planted the seeds. They've laid the groundwork of what would a Braun Breaker versus Jacob Fatu look like. Oh, I'm very intrigued. I don't necessarily need to see Jacob Fatu going after the Intercontinental Championship or the U.S. Championship. I don't need that. I think Jacob Fatu's a main event guy. And in fact, I'd say he's more main event than Jey Uso. And I would certainly say that if you're going to continue the Bloodline story, which kind of seems to be in a bit of flux right now, given the fact that The Rock may or may not be involved going forward, given the fact that Solo lost and they kind of killed off the new Bloodline push, or at least they put it on ice, I'm here for Jacob Fatu. And the promo that he cut, by the way, didn't feel like one of the pre-rehearsed, reading it within your mind, going word for word. It felt very off the cuff. Tells the audience, shut the hell up! The voice cracks. Jacob Fatu tells you that the worst, what is to come, is going to be even more impactful than anything you've seen to this point. And all of a sudden, I go on over to Twitter, and I'm taking a look at where people tend to be very negative. And for the most part, I see people saying, that guy was allowed to cook. And cook he did. Now, was he Walter White level of cooking? I don't know. But I would certainly strap a massive rocket. He's a big boy. He moves very gracefully. But I'd put a giant rocket on his back. Might have to call up Elon. Might have to get one of them from SpaceX, one of the ones that comes back down to Earth. Because if you're going to put the rocket on him, right, eventually he's going to have to come back down. And maybe get embraced by whatever the hell they call that thing at SpaceX that catches the booster. Getting myself distracted, but you get it. Jacob Fatu looked like a legitimate star. I can't wait to see where this goes. I assume that we're going to hear more about it on SmackDown on Friday, but that was the number one story for me that came out of SmackDown last week. It is the most intriguing thing, and as many of you are aware at this point, I am not the biggest Cody Rhodes believer, and I think that the sooner they can get him in an actual program with a threat, the better. And I would say that Jacob Fatu would represent a hell of a threat. Now, where do you go storyline-wise from there? If Jacob Fatu were to win the championship from Cody Rhodes, does that then turn into Roman versus Fatu? Because I'm more interested in that than I was in Roman versus Solo. If Fatu makes it known, if he were to win a championship, or if he were to line up across from Roman Reigns, where does Solo Sikoa's loyalties lie? Does he back a guy that he hand-selected to be part of his bloodline? Or does he acknowledge Roman Reigns' tribal chief and turn his back on Fatu and Tama Tonga and Tongaloa? Are there more Samoans on the horizon? Yes, there are. Are there more Samoans on the horizon who could side with Fatu? Is now Fatu the leader of the new bloodline? I have a lot of questions, and the beauty of the segment is that because Solo didn't really give you an indication either way, it opens up the possibilities even more. This was chef's kiss. Picture perfect. Big supporter here of Jacob Fatu and everything that he does on SmackDown.